Welcome to the nose. So it's going to be a strange nose episode. Maybe they're all strange. This one will be strange in its own particular way. Partly because I really don't think we know what we're talking about in the second segment. We've been, as we do, emailing back and forth for days. And so the second segment will be a melange of something. And that's about as far as I am prepared to go right now. Although I think one of the aspects of this is the idea of there's almost sort of an atmosphere of corporate schadenfreude these days. You know, I mean, you watch Succession and you actually sort of root for these horrible people in the Roy family. But then you watch Twitter and you root against the horrible person who owns it. And the same goes, of course, for Fox News and the Dominion lawsuit. I mean, everybody was just waiting to watch the real-life version of the Roy family, the Murdoch family, go on trial. Anyway, there'll be something like that, and it has to do with spoilers and Emmy deadlines, and I don't know. But we're going to begin by talking about Beef. Beef is a new series on Netflix. It is, as so many things are, kind of serio-comic in nature. And it's specifically the title refers not to things that you eat, but things that happen between people when they don't get along, and specifically two motorists who have a bad encounter, and things just kind of get progressively worse from there. It stars Ali Wong as Amy and Stephen Yeun as Danny Cho, and has a pretty strong supporting cast as well. And now I'm going to tell you who's here to talk about it. He's a Johnny Carson fan with a peninsula mentality, Jacques Lamarre, a playwright and chief communications officer at Buzz Engine. She loves to put on a Dick Cheney mask and be mean to crows. Tracy Wu Fastenberg is development officer at Connecticut Children's. And his vomit is pretty because he loves Skittles. Bill Yousman is professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University. Let's get going here. This is, I should say that I think almost everybody on the panel, maybe everybody in the panel finished. I'm the bad kid in class. I'm 7 episodes in. I've got 3 to go. So I will protect the rest of you out there from spoilers. I'll be a human shield because I don't want to have any spoilers either. So Tracy Wu Fastenberg, I mean, we're so happy. I mean, it was almost impossible to do this show without you because this series is a lot of different things, and it's funny and it's sad and it sometimes makes you anxious, but it's also just shot through with various kinds of fairly complicated issues among Asian Americans and different Asian American communities and kind of signifiers that a lot of us maybe outside that community might miss and sort of anyway, I just overall, are you happy with this series? Are you happy with all the things that it does?
I am. I actually will fully admit that I threatened to start a very big beef with Pants if he did not let me come talk about this.
Yeah, you know, when you painted all that stuff about him on his car, that was going too far. I just want to say.
Well, I mean, and then I sealed it with some shellac, so there's no chance of him getting that off. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed this, you know, and it wasn't just because of the all Asian cast, you know, obviously that is what hooked me in. I will say that, you know, towards the middle, there were some points where I'm like, all right, have we completely jumped the shark here? But I think in the whole, it was really a great series to watch. I hope they do a season 2. You know, I loved the actors. I loved the characters because they were nuanced and complicated, and it didn't follow along some of the Asian American tropes that you hear nowadays of, you know, my generation mostly being, you know, first generation, somehow traumatized by generational trauma, you know, from our immigrant parents or immigrant grandparents, and that carrying down. And yes, that is absolutely a factor, but it's much more complicated than that. And I think this recognized it, especially in Ali Wong's character, where, you know, she sort of does that in a certain scene where she says, yes, you know, this is why I am the way I am, and kind of hides behind it. But then later on, we see that it's a lot more complicated than that. I think that, you know, there were so many different kinds of characters there. Not all the successful Asians, not all the disappointing your Asian parents, which is what I think people think of now when they think of Asian Americans. But it was real life. It didn't have to be Asian characters. It was woven in a really nice way to the story. that was very relatable for me. But, my husband, who is not Asian, enjoyed it as well. And I think it gave him certain insights, into what I've grown up with too, everything from the Asian church to the, trying to please a parent, but sometimes your issues are your own.
As you can see, Tracy does not really have very much to say about this series.
Nothing.
So we'll
Zero.
Pretty much have to lean on Bill and Jacques for most of this, I'm thinking. So let's hear a little clip from the series. The aforementioned Ali Wong plays Amy. Joseph Lee plays her husband, George, who is either a really, really nice guy or a cuck, depending on how you think about these things. And here's a little of their conversation.
Are you okay? Did something happen at Forster's?
Oh, no. Everything went great. Jordan showed me her flagship store, and she invited us to her home tomorrow. So, usual love fest.
Well, then what's going on? You seem all riled up. Babe, come on. Talk to me.
Okay. Well, after the meeting, I was sitting in the parking lot thinking about how many meetings and calls I've had to do for the last 2 years. Still, somehow, there's no offer coming. And it just really got to me, So then I started driving, and then there was this guy.
Before you spiral, I'm going to have you stop right there. Take a deep breath. Pause. You got to start focusing on the positive, okay? Maybe we should start doing the gratitude journals again.
So, Bill Yousman, one of the things that clip kind of highlights, too, is the way I think that this series really intriguingly asks you, where is its center of reality? Because George often, as he does in this clip, is the one who kind of seems like he's maybe talking sense, and obviously a little bit of a spacey, sensitive New Age guy kind of way. But he's one of the few people in the series who, A, doesn't have a fairly horrible hidden agenda, at least over the first 7 episodes, and B, is in fact sort of urging everybody to calm down. But it seems like the world of stress and thwarted aspiration really is the reality of this series. That's kind of where the rubber is meeting the road. And George often seems kind of on the sidelines, irrelevantly calling in helpful stress-reducing instructions.
Yeah, and eventually we're going to find out that George, he's got his own little thing going on as well, which we can't spoil for anybody.
But are we talking about the emotional thing?
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's a thing. Anyway, continue.
Well, it's an aspiration. It's indicative of a certain kind of desire and emptiness, which all of the characters share, I think. And I think the performances are really great, and everybody brings out their own dysfunction, their own distress, their own unease, each in their own way. And that's part of, Tracy said it was relatable. That's part of what makes it, I agree, like really relatable. Maybe things haven't spiraled out of control as much as they do in this particular program, but we've all had, either encounters with road rage, whether we were the one initiating it or whether we were just observing it or we were being victimized by it. Hey, I drive to work on the Merritt Parkway. So, which I fondly refers to as, Fury Road. So we all can relate to that. Colin, you and I had, there's an NDA about it, but, we had that ugly incident in the Big Y parking lot, and our beef between you and me, it went on for like a good 6 months, didn't it?
Well, you kept yelling, I'm Big Y. This is not Big Y.
Exactly.
You call me Big Y.
And then I did that thing and I blamed it on Declan on your front step. Right. And but my point is that I think everybody can relate to just like the indignities of daily life that just start to get to the bursting point. And that's exactly where this program takes it in a whole, really explosive kind of way.
So we've heard a little bit from Ali Wong. She does play this. I don't even know exactly what to describe her, but she's sort of this feng shui kind of artist who uses plants or something. I don't know. Somebody else is going to have to explain it. But she's on the cusp of stardom. But she is dependent on a character kind of brilliantly played by Maria Bello, who is a multi-billionaire vendor of stuff. And she has to be sort of acquired by Maria Bello in order for success to happen. Meanwhile, her rival, the other side of the beef, is Danny Cho, played by Stephen Yeun, a guy who is really kind of a handyman claiming to be a contractor. Maybe he's almost a contractor. Let's hear him and Young Mazzino as his brother Paul Cho. Here's A2 Cat.
Yo, remember that guy I got into that road rage with? Turns out it was a woman. Sometimes rock bottom is your trampoline. I can't hear you. See something you like, baby bro? Go get it. You gotta take control, man.
I am in control.
Oh, yeah? What's your plan then?
I'm gonna take a and I'm gonna go play ball.
No, like in your life. Like right now, what is your plan?
Well, once you change my passwords back, I'm gonna become a crypto millionaire and travel the world with my boys.
Okay, your boys? All right, what are you and boys gonna do? Like, what's your boys' plan?
It's easy. 3 10x trades. 1K to 10K, 10K to 100, 100 to a million. Boom.
You're just saying higher numbers.
Oh, well, what's your plan?
All right, so Jacques Lamarre. First of all, just give. I think one of the things that this series is about is repression, and what happens if you're repressing a lot of stuff. And in some ways, it's. I'm sure Tracy will have some stuff to say about degrees to which that is or is not a valid representation of an Asian stereotype. But I'm just maybe interested in how you tuned into this series. I know you've been enjoying it because you haven't been complaining as much as you usually do.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you because this makes up for the indignity of having to watch Ali Wong in Paper Girls, which was terrible.
But she was good. She was good. It was a bad series, but she was good in it.
She was good. She was, but she's great in this because she has great actors to bounce off of, great writing to dig into. She is able to lean into comedy, which is obviously her strong suit. But what a surprise in terms of her dramatic chops. Because I have not seen her other than in Paper Girls and things. The show is so, I think it deals with repressed feelings that bubble up in explosions of rage. But it's so. I think it has to do with these people who don't really know what they want and are frustrated with themselves for it, or they think they have a desire for something that isn't necessarily going to bring the happiness or solutions that they want. They all end up creating more problems for themselves.
Yeah, it's got so much in it, that way. And Jacques, I have sort of unfortunately didn't finish it. I'm in episode 7, but episode 7 sort of takes place a little bit later after some of the earlier events, and people are kind of reflecting on what happened and whether anything is ever enough. And at this point, I thought, they're beginning to almost kind of seriously meditate a little bit about life and what life is really like when you're living it, as opposed to being kind of in this kind of seesawing comic versus noir thing that's earlier on in the series.
Yeah, and the final episode, giving no spoilers, really digs into that on, it's an extended conversation basically, and over the course of the episode, and everything has been stripped from these people, and they are basically laid bare in such a way that they've never been able to communicate, and it's really, really quite lovely especially after the 7th episode, which is insanity in terms of everything that's going on. It's very plot driven, the 7th episode, whereas the 8th episode is really, a dialogue. It's really, really quite amazing. But to me, what really made this show shine is that characters that you thought were kind of superfluous to the action get developed, and you realize that there's a lot going on in their lives too.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just such depth and dimensionality to them that you care about almost all of their outcomes, even the jerks.
Yes. Well, we should get to one of the jerks and whether or not he's a jerk in real life for just a second. But yeah, I know, Tracy, I don't want to overlean on you for Asianness questions. Although I do think, so I wanted to make sure I was saying the name of Stephen Yeun correctly. And people who thought they recognized his voice, he was Glenn in The Walking Dead, maybe one of the most beloved characters in The Walking Dead. But so I found a clip of him on Conan O'Brien's show in which Conan O'Brien explained that they'd really gotten to know each other. They'd done shows together multiple times, and then they'd kind of been on the road together and some long plane flights. And coming back from one of these trips, Stephen Yeun leaned over to him and said, "You've been saying my name wrong." And Conan O'Brien said, "Like just now, just on this trip?" And he said, "No, for 2 years." And to me, that's, it's a little bit of what we see in some of these characterizations, Tracy, is, people who are so at such pains not to be the bad guy that they create unnecessarily awkward situations.
Sounds about right. I mean, honestly, and I think that does kind of come in some social mores of Asian cultures. And I can't, I'm Chinese. I can't say that I am an expert on all Asian cultures, but there is a thing that always comes up. It's been memeified, of just sort of being agreeable and just letting stuff go. I mean, I let somebody call me Wendy for 2 years at a place that I was working in college. And, I corrected her the first time, but I went back for winter breaks and summer breaks. And she kept on calling me Wendy, and I kept on answering to it. So I totally get where that comes from. You don't want to rock the boat because that's very much what you've been taught, especially if it's, you're an elder or, something like that. But I think this did a good job of breaking that down a little bit. You saw 3 different generations come through, and I have to give a shout out to that adorable little girl, Remy Holt.
Yeah.
Because she was
love her.
Fantastic. If you saw her on the red carpet, even there, like even in photographs about the show, I think she just did such a nice job too for a young actress. But you got to see some of that break down over time too, over the generations. And even in George's mom, Fumi, you can tell they've been in the States for a couple generations. She's a little more crunchy herself, which is where George gets it. So you really, in this series, get a great feeling of how vast and diverse even the Asian community is.
Right. We were talking about the term jerks came up, Bill, and so one of the things
and that's when you turn to me.
That's what I just said. I would turn to you. But I'm still mad about that the whole big Y thing. Yeah. So no. David Choi plays Isaac, who is a jerk. He is the cousin of the 2 brothers. Danny and Paul, and he's kind of a sociopath. But he's also sort of an endearingly funny kind of guy, one of the guys who really sort of occasionally spits out these kind of whimsically funny arguments and ideas and stuff like that. And apparently in real life, I didn't know too much about the real David Choi, and maybe nobody does, because many, many years ago, I think it was 2014, on a podcast he has that has a name that is an acronym that I just don't even want to delve into right now, like what the acronym stands for and stuff. But he described what I think he called rapey behavior with a masseuse. Then he subsequently repudiated that statement, kind of said he was in a persona, that he was playing some version of himself. The whole thing disappeared after a while. And then it's kind of come roaring back because beef is kind of in the conversation these days. And I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll start this one out and take everybody else off the hook and just say, I just think these things that people do that are things that they said kind of a long time ago. I mean, the guy kind of specializes in acting like a very, very unattractive jerk. And as a result, he's just a very sought-after guest on the Joe Rogan show. I think he goes on all the time because that's very much the vibe of that. And I don't know. I mean, absent some proof that he wasn't just playing a role and stuff, I'm not really sure I consider this to be the kind of controversy that it seems to be turning into.
Well, I think it's obviously a very, very important issue in terms of what's happening outside
Mhm.
of the realm of this fantasy construction. But it's this perennial question that, we deal with on the nose so much because, there's just bad people out there, and bad people are sometimes, involved in the creative arts. And, in this particular example, he's not even, like one of the auteurs behind this. It's not like a Cosby situation or something like that. He's one of the supporting actors. And so, I don't, I hesitate to say this in some ways, but I don't know if that really has, as you say, that much to do with the way we're receiving this particular narrative project. There are obviously many, many other issues outside of the screen that this pertains to, but how far can we go with drilling down? Is it, what happens when it's, someone who's working in costuming or, props or whatever? This is a contributing actor, and it's obviously a real concern, but I don't think it should affect the way we interpret this particular program in any way.
Yeah, he's got the fifth billing and a six-member main
Right.
cast, so it doesn't really feel like, I don't know. Does anybody else, we have to go to a break here pretty quickly. Either Jacques or Wu, do you want to chime in on the David Choi situation?
I've got to because, I follow a lot of Asian social media. And I think one of the things that's challenging about it is because we are finally getting this kind of representation. To have something like this shadow it is a problem, especially for people who've been waiting for it for a long time. And from what is in the ether is that Stephen Yeun and Ali Wong advocated for him to be part of the cast because he's not an actor. And they've been radio silent about it. The A24 has been also. And I think that's a little bit more of where some of the controversy comes into play is, if you make a mistake and bring on somebody who is either joking about something that is wretched or has done something that is wretched, where is some accountability there? And I think that's part of the conversation as well as, when you have somebody from a minoritized group who is doing this, it has a much larger effect than maybe other groups may find.
That's
point.
a really good point.
Very good point, yeah. Okay, we're going to grab a break right here. Actually, I'm not really going to go away because Kat and I are going to do some pledging in just a second here, or try to get you to do some pledging, actually. And then we'll be back with a very amorphous conversation that has something to do with Twitter and spoilers. Yes. Well, it is springtime, and the robins are back, but that's not what we're talking about right now. We don't really know what we're talking about here. I mean, that could be said really of any episode of The Nose, but we really don't really know what we're talking about right now. But in some ways, it has something to do with Twitter, Twitter possibly circling the drain, Twitter stripping the blue check marks, verifying people, including famous celebrities. We're also going to be talking about spoilers. It's the time of year where spoilers are a real problem. It's because the Emmy deadline is May 31st. It has to have been shown on screens by May 31st. And so you've got all these prestigious, scripted, fictional TV shows like Beef, like The Power, but especially like Ted Lasso, Succession, Barry, Fox News. All of them really are kind of rolling out their highly fictionalized content. And so it's very, very easy. It's hard to keep up with it all at once, and it's very easy to have it spoiled, particularly on Twitter. So I don't know, Jacques, you seem to be somewhat interested in the drama of Twitter. It's sort of weird because Elon Musk, he's sort of a fusion of Logan Roy and a Bond villain. There's some way that we are just really meant to root against him in a way that seems almost more like how we would root against a fictional villain or something.
I mean, how many of us would be rooting for like the SpaceX rocket to explode or Tesla self-driving vehicles going, AWOL or whatever? I mean, I guess we all knew he was horrible. But it's like his acquisition of Twitter just made it so transparent.
Yeah.
And his taking, these verification checks away from people's accounts so that you can actually trust what's coming from those accounts is really, I mean, the level of petulance is amazing. And so it's just like, hearing, what is it, Canadian Broadcasting Company, he changed their designation that they're partially funded or whatever, by public dollars, and
well, he did it. He did it to us. He did it to first. He started out picking on NPR. He first called it state-affiliated media, which is a direct evocation of the propaganda arms in Russia and China and totalitarian regimes. A state-affiliated media has a very specific kind of meaning. And then when there was some pushback, he called it government-funded government-funded media. I'm contractually required to tell you we get roughly NPR gets 1% of its $300 million budget from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which gets money from the government anyway. So yeah.
Is any of this like a surprise to you, Colin, in terms of like, has he surprised you in any way since he's taken over Twitter, or is this like totally on brand for him?
What surprises me, and I want to go to Mr. Media Studies in just a second here on this because he may have a sharper take on it than I do. Although I've been teaching this in my political journalism seminar this spring. We've sort of been tracking Twitter because it has a huge journalistic function. It's very important for journalists too. To me, what's surprising is this, going into this guy was the second richest man in the world. He bought for $44 billion a company that appears to have a book value of about $20 billion. Now, I'm not the second richest man in the world. He clearly knows more about money and stuff like that than I do, but it was kind of hard to figure that out. And then he proceeded to do everything in his power to run the freaking thing into the ground, and I really do feel like, I'm watching Twitter be run by Kendall and Shiv and Roman Roy. It's one of the fun things about Succession is you realize that these people don't necessarily know what they're doing any more than you would in their circumstances. But I don't know, Bill. I mean, we're trying at an academic level to understand media, and media is changing really fast, right? We're trying to diagram an architecture that's on fire some of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing I have to say is I have to acknowledge that everything I say on today's episode has been scripted by the CIA. So I just want to make that transparent. But, the Papulian through line here is horrible people, jerks, just like we were talking about in the first episode, as Wendy pointed out. What I do think this reveals, and this is how I would approach it in the classroom without boring all of you to death like I do my students, is the importance of media ownership, of looking at the political economy of media and who owns these platforms and why do they own them and what are their purposes. And, that does make a difference in terms of, how these things function. And I think people in paying attention to media from an academic way, we did see this coming. I mean, we knew Musk was a jerk. I was here on the nose a long time ago calling Musk a jerk. I think I was on that episode where he hosted Saturday Night Live. Mm-hmm. But this was a slow motion disaster. And it's actually, I think, been even worse than was predicted in terms of not just the technical problems, and there are lots of technical problems, but the full unleashing of racism and transphobia and anti-vax conspiracy nonsense. That's the stuff that now makes it so unpleasant for me as a user. But the other thing I want to say quickly is we also have to recognize, and this relates to what you were saying, Colin, about, how it's not really that valuable of a media product. Twitter only has 368 million monthly active users. And I know you say 368 million and you think, wow, that's a lot. That's worldwide. And it's the 14th most popular social media site in the world. 14th. only about 7.2% of all internet users access Twitter once a month. So it has like this outsized reputation that far outdistances what it really is. And that maybe is one of the things that he wasn't smart enough to know.
Right. Although, I mean, we should say sometimes it matters who your membership is.
Yes,
and
right. Journalists and
right. You get
yes.
the chattering classes. You got a lot of people whose eyeballs other people want to reach.
Agreed.
I would say that pushes its at least theoretical valuation higher. But yeah.
Yes, that's right.
So Wendy, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll call you Tracy Wu Fastenberg, which is your real name.
I'm never calling her anything but Wendy again.
I wanted to call you Wendy just once.
Her name is now Wendy.
Done. Sold.
Done. So, all right. So you can take this conversation any direction you want to. You can do more Twitter or veer us over towards spoilers. The floor is yours. You're holding the conch shell.
Oh, wow. I've never had so much power in my life.
Yes.
I will say about Twitter that the day that it was confirmed that the purchase was going through, I closed my account, which really is, given that I never used it, was more of a, stance in like utterance than deed. Like it doesn't really do a whole lot, but at the same time, you could see what was coming down the line. You could see that it was probably going to be a poop show, that's what was going to start happening. And I think that that's definitely happened. And I'm not a media studies professor, but, I think that there was a lot of fear, especially among minoritized communities, because there have been so many subsections of Twitter that have contributed to the culture and, the communication there. And to have that under threat is that's a huge issue. But as far as spoilers, I have to admit, I am not somebody who minds spoilers. I am the jerk who goes and like reads ahead sometimes. And I'm blowing up my own spot here because now my husband knows that sometimes I will go and read ahead on some of the series that we watch, because it doesn't bother me because I want to see how we get there, not just the end product. But I also, do respect people that will start a huge beef with me and then possibly write all over my car if I spoiled something for them.
Right. By the way, we don't use the term poop show anymore. We say in the manner of one of the two rude mechanical thieves in Beef, it's as if herpes poo-pooed, which I think that's how he describes one of the sculptures.
What an image.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, in a way, we could wrap here, but I'll just quickly take the temperature of each of the other two guests about spoilers. Jacques, are spoilers a big worry for you? I know you're a Succession watcher, and this has been something sort of happened by surprise on Succession. And I could say more about how it was memorialized in places like the LA Times, but I don't know. Do you worry about spoilers?
I do. Even though it's been gigantically disappointing this season, I haven't watched the last episode of The Mandalorian because I was binging Beef, and I am grateful that I have not seen any spoilers so that I can experience it the way the creators wanted it experienced. Mm-hmm. And so, if I had known, the major plot development from, 2 episodes ago on Succession, that would have been, I think, I was already aware because I did not watch it the moment that it dropped that something big happened. And that, it was going to really kind of change the course of the show. If I had known exactly what was happening going into it, I would have been disappointed.
Right. Bill Yousman, spoilers, quick take.
Yeah, and that's where I was. Not to contradict Wendy, but I despise spoilers. And it's because of what Jacques just said. Like, I want to see it the way the creator intended for it to be unveiled. And unfortunately, I was one of those people who found out what happened on Succession before I saw it. And it changed my experience of it. And I was, really kind of miffed about that. I've also, but maybe I'm extreme. I've been miffed about finding out about Jeopardy spoilers in the past. So,
I've seen people get really mad about that. I will say,
including me.
The first time, this is years ago, the first time Ileana Douglas was on our show, she had written a book that involved Dennis Hopper and Easy Rider, and I mentioned something about the end of Easy Rider, and I got a really angry email. This guy was furious at me. I mean, he was just steam coming out of his ears, and I'm thinking, Easy Rider came out like I mean, you've had almost 50 years to watch this movie.
There should be some statute of limitations here.
Yeah, I mean, Rosebud, I would never tell you what Rosebud was, but I mean, I also don't think it's somebody's fault if they tell you. All right, we have to go to a break right here. We will come back and recommend some things afterwards.
At night when the wind is still, I'll come flying through your door. And you'll know what love is for. I'm a bluebird, I'm a bluebird, I'm a bluebird, I'm a bluebird. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm a bluebird, I'm a bluebird, I'm a bluebird. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Support for Connecticut Public Radio comes from Middlesex Health, Connecticut's connection to second opinions from specialists at Mayo Clinic at no cost to you, so you get the answers you need close to home. Learn more at middlesexhealth.org/Mayo.
It's Coachella season, and of course, Bad Bunny is headlining. He just dropped a single with the band Grupo Frontera, who are known for Mexican regional music, a genre with roots that go back 150 years. And now it's topping music charts.
We're talking about all of the world. This is really a watershed moment for the genre.
Hear that on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Listen this afternoon at 4. Support comes from Comcast Business. Support comes from Central Connecticut State University. With more than 75 graduate, professional, and certificate programs, CCSU offers an array of academic options to choose from. More at ccsu.edu/grad.
The New England News Collaborative provides stories daily on the topics that impact our region. With your support, we can provide more of the news you want.
Support for the NENC comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Common Sense Fund, and the Smart Family Foundation.
Support for Connecticut Public Radio comes from Yukon Health, conducting a study to test a medication for those who want to reduce their alcohol consumption. Compensation provided. Call 860-679-7000. That's 860-679-7000.
All right, so time to say some thank yous. Start with Kat Pastor. She's the technical producer of this show. She thinks we should have made fun of Andrew Santino more when we were talking about beef. And Jonathan McPants, he is the producer of this episode and is always the producer of The Nose pretty much all the time. We're going to make some recommendations here. Jacques Lamarre, why don't you get us going?
I don't know if you've recommended this on another episode, but you recommended it to me personally. And it's Mary Rogers' memoir, Shy.
Yeah.
Which came out posthumously. And the book is a riot. She's so frank. She's so funny. She knew everybody in theater, in some kind of intimate level. And it's co-written with Jesse Green. It has the most amazing footnotes ever in a book.
It does. The footnotes are amazing. It's one of those books, too, that the other person who's in the room with you is going to read the book because you're going to keep looking up and go, listen to this. You have to read all these things out loud to people. All right. So Tracy Wu Fastenberg, what are you going to endorse?
I need to endorse two things that both happen to be in Wethersfield. One is Comstock. I hadn't been there yet, and I know that they had, closed, reopened, yada yada. It's a landmark as far as what the building is, but the number of seeds as I get my garden ready that are really interesting varieties there. They're local. There's even like an onion that's like a specific Wethersfield onion variety. But they also have coffee, and they know that they have some events and little snacks and a bar and everything. And it's just, they've turned it into a very cool place. So I would definitely say that is a good place to visit with spring coming and everybody getting their outsides ready. And the other is the Charles, which is a restaurant in Wethersfield. My husband and I went there a couple months ago for dinner, and it's in an old historic building. The food was delicious. The vibe was really nice, and the ambiance was great. So really recommend just going down there, maybe doing both in one outing.
Yeah, make a day of it in Wethersfield. All right. Bill Yousman, what are you going to endorse or recommend, or both?
I'm going to first endorse Bloomfield Parks and Rec. That's not a spin-off show. Actually, Bloomfield Leisure Services. Even at my advanced age, I still love to play very low-level basketball. And I was looking for a place where I could play during the winter. And I discovered this really lovely facility that they have just past the center of Bloomfield. It's a fantastic building. The staff are all really, really nice, and they have all kinds of programming for people of all ages. It's really a model for what a community center should be. So any of my Bloomfield peeps, shout out to Bloomfield Leisure Services. And then a couple things to listen to. Natalie Merchant has her first album of all new material in almost a decade. It's called Keep Your Courage. It's pretty downbeat, but it's really lovely and beautiful. And then finally, Prince died 7 years ago today. And I think from what I know about the people on this show today, all four of us would agree that everybody should go listen to some Prince today.
Very, very. It's a good advice on any day, but certainly today. All right. I'll recommend three things. The first of them, this might sound kind of obvious, but the first of them is sleep. So I'm a really bad sleeper, just generally. I'm a bad sleeper. And if you're a bad sleeper, one thing that can happen is your standards slip so low that you don't realize that you're sleeping even worse than usual. And that happened to me recently. I mean, it happened to me sort of this week. We just have had a lot of stress coming into the show right now just because we're relaunching it. I'm trying to end my course. Other stuff is going on. And I just wasn't sleeping very well at all. And I really... By yesterday, I announced to Lily, our senior producer, that I couldn't go to a 4:00 meeting. I mean, I was really basically like a marionette that Lily Tyson was leading around the building. I just was not able to function at all. So last night, I took 2 Benadryl, went to bed early, decided not to watch the Phoenix Suns, got 7 hours of sleep, and I'm like a Superman today. So if you're not sleeping enough, like 7 hours is a lot for me. I mean, figure it out. Everybody has a different recipe. Nothing works for everybody. Melatonin or whatever it is, and there are apps on your phone. Whatever you have to do. There are some great books about this. Whatever you have to do, just don't put it on the back burner. Getting a lot of sleep is really important. And then when you've gotten enough sleep, you will notice certain things that you don't pay attention to the rest of the time, including apple blossoms. Those of you who are in our audience who live in Connecticut, right now is apple blossom time. We have listeners in Thailand and Chile. I don't really know what's happening there. But the apple blossoms are beautiful. I was up on a hill in Bloomfield today, actually, and just so beautiful, so wonderful. The last thing is, it's always something month. And it's usually sort of bogus. But April is Poetry Month, and that's not bogus. And I really do just recommend, I don't know, like this week, I heard about somebody's dog who was named Angus, but it was Aengus, like in Yeats. And I went back and read that poem. And we talked to this philosopher who mentioned the Seamus Heaney poem about where hope and history rhyme. And I realized these are all Irish poets. I don't really know. There probably are other kinds of poets, ones who aren't Irish. You're welcome to go seek them out as well. But anyway, don't shortchange yourself. It really is a wonderful thing. And we are going to say thank you to these wonderful guests. Tracy Wu Fastenberg, a.k.a. Wendy, Bill Yousman, the Big Y, and Jacques Lamarre, the Johnny Carson fan with a peninsula mentality. Thanks to all of you, and we're going to actually ask you to pledge in just a couple seconds.